Iron Man is pretty badass, but even a guy as cool and smooth as Tony Stark has baggage on and off the fighting field. Let's take a look at some of the weaknesses Iron Man faces and even conquered. But before we dive deep into Tony Stark's lesser-known weaknesses, be sure to take a minute to subscribe to CBR and ring that bell to join our notification squad so you never miss any of our MCU videos. His heart. One of the first things that endears us to Tony is that he has heart problems after suffering a horrible chest wound in the first movie, leaving dangerous shrapnel near his heart. This magnetic chest plate keeps the shrapnel drawn away so it never enters his heart. He still has a human heart, at least in the MCU, and the reactor is used to keep the shrapnel from killing him, which of course changes in the third movie when he gets the surgery. So while at the beginning, having to have a plate to keep your heart from getting shish kebabbed by metal may seem like a weakness, in true hero form, Tony makes the best of the situation and uses this as a jumping board to make his suits even better. His drinking. It's no secret that Tony Stark likes a cocktail, or 5. We see it sprinkled throughout the other comics, depicting him as fighting super drunk, and it takes center stage in the comic miniseries Demon in a Bottle. When you think about it, it makes sense that the MCU didn't want to make Tony's drinking a prevalent thing in movies. Here's what the director of the 2 Iron Man films, Jon Favreau, had to say about the whole drinking situation. Stark has issues with booze. That's a part of who he is. In Iron Man 2, Favreau notes that in the scene of Tony drunkenly walking around the party in his armor at his mansion until Colonel James Rhodes intervenes is the closest he intended to adapt the Demon in a Bottle storyline. Need to recharge. It's not the greatest strength to have no superpowers of your own, but also that your powers run in a suit that needs to be recharged to work. That was the case for Stark in Iron Man 3. The battery is what is keeping the suit flying, shooting, and able to use the Jarvis AI system. His battery not being operational causes tons of problems in Iron Man 3. Granted, as a major plot point, it forces him to not be able to fly to California, and he ends up using a car battery to charge himself up. The suit even gets charged up by Thor's lightning too. Okay, so Tony, needing to be recharged, serves as good plot fodder, especially when he finally gets the surgery to remove the shrapnel and throws the reactor into the sea, saying that he'll always be Iron Man. Memory problems. In the comic series, Stark disassembled, Tony is faced with the erasure of all his memories to keep the evil villain Norman Osborn from getting access to the Superhuman Registration Act, which are fictional legislative bills that enforce the regulation of vigilante versus criminal activity or the mandatory registration of superpowered individuals with the government. After rebooting his memories, he still had memory lapses and could no longer remember certain parts of his life. With this weakness and him being on a reactor which powers his suit, if the reactor stopped working, his whole body would fail and he would die. So if you're interested in this plot, check out the Stark Disassembled series, which finds Stark in a coma that leaves him experiencing crazy dreams, where he solves puzzles, mysteries, and even full-scale attacks that are all in his mind. EMP. Over the many years of watching Iron Man in the MCU, many fans wondered about Iron Man's defense against EMP, also known as electromagnetic pulse. It doesn't sound intimidating, but it can shut down entire electronic systems. It's a major weakness, because Tony's suit is, well, everything in terms of battle. But he's not left completely vulnerable with this EMP weakness. It's shown that he can sense them at times, like when the Winter Soldier tried to use an EMP against Stark, but Tony shut it down just in time before it did anything to his suit. His suit is made out of the most durable alloy ever made, like ever, so if EMPs want to penetrate his armor, it would have to be really strong. Iron Man's reactors are also super important to him, which makes them vulnerable because if he was hit with an EMP that damaged one of those reactors, he's left very weak and vulnerable. Questionable decision making. If you're not in the right mind to make good decisions while you're a leader of a mega superhero team, that could probably be chalked up as a big weakness. While some deal directly with other faults on this list, like his drinking, some are just really bad. Granted, these plots are never seen in the MCU because we want to keep Tony a likable guy, but in the comics, he got kind of brutal. Like one time, he just executed a bunch of prisoners. This was in the comic Invincible Iron Man, where Stark was becoming aggressive and learned he wasn't in control of himself anymore, nor could his Avengers pals control him. He also kidnapped Ulysses, which kicked off the second civil war between himself, Captain Marvel, and her teams. While they both fought for good reasons, you can admit that Tony kind of instigated most of it, which causes a good amount of problems. He also faked his own death when his drinking problem got too great. His death deeply upset Rodney Rhodes, who took up the gauntlet as Stark's CEO for the time being and was gifted the Iron Man suit. Imagine his shock when Tony revealed he faked his own death. Of course, Rhodes felt very betrayed. Being a womanizer, it might be just us, but every time we hear the word womanizer, we start singing that Britney Spears song. Womanizer, woman. Just us? Yeah? Okay. Moving on.
Wow!
Tony Stark is a well-known womanizer in both the comics he appears in and well throughout most of the movies before hanging up his Playboy belt and settling down with Pepper Potts. Many think that if Tony Stark was introduced today, he might not be as well received as this Playboy archetype. Granted, most of his past with other women are actually romantic longer-term relationships, at least how they're shown in the comics, but he's still painted as a Playboy with money to throw around. The introduction of Pepper Potts as a romantic lead made Tony a better person as well as a better Iron Man. Sure, the whole being a millionaire philanderer is an interesting character trait, but it's 2018. We're kind of over it and expect more out of our heroes. Plus, we like settled down family Tony better. His power is suit-bound. Iron Man is one of the most powerful superheroes in the MCU and in the comics, but that's because he made one of the most powerful suits ever that solely exists because Stark is a crazy tech genius. While we all agree Tony is just as much Iron Man without the suit, he still kind of needs the suit to fight. We get it. Him throwing the arc reactor into the ocean is a nice metaphor, but at the end of the day, Tony needs the suit just as much as the suit needs him to man it. It's super interesting that the head of the Avengers isn't really super at all, and all his powers rely on his tech. But just because of that, he isn't any less super. Without all the high-powered tech, Stark for sure wouldn't even be alive. Like we've mentioned, his life hangs in the balance because of the arc reactor, leaving him constantly vulnerable for something to happen to him or his suit, which could land him out of the fighting game for good. Even though in Infinity War he has a new reactor that still powers the suit but doesn't have to pull away any shrapnel, we still have to wonder, what would Iron Man be without his suit? A millionaire who has a great wife with a baby on the way, so not that bad off, but he does want to serve justice up to bad guys, so that would probably be a little less fulfilling. Tech gives Stark a cool advantage over both villains and other superheroes, because he can constantly change and upgrade his powers. Ego. We see Tony's ego at play throughout the entire Avengers series and in its one-off movies. Being a genius at 10 and building robots before becoming the CEO of a huge company would probably go to anyone's head, but Stark's ego tends to be his downfall every now and then. It works out though because his ego tends to humble him and keeps his sarcasticness in check, but then he remembers that he's mega intelligent, inherited his dad's billion-dollar company, and can get all the girls he could ever want, so Tony being humble doesn't last long. While Stark's charisma makes him a great leader, his ego sometimes gets in the way and ends up as a huge weakness for him. Hero complex. The hero complex archetype isn't new. In fact, Iron Man isn't even the only one on the Avengers team to fit that bill. Many fans suggest that Iron Man has the most developed arc through MCU history because of everything he goes through and how he changes throughout the movies. This included him developing his dangerous hero complex. Hero complex, or hero syndrome, is the phenomenon affecting people who seek heroism or recognition by creating a desperate situation which they can resolve. Having such a hero complex is a huge weakness because it keeps you out of the real world and has you living in your own hero fantasy. Now, in Infinity War, it's literally up to Stark to save the entire world. but he's stuck on a big old rock. A hero complex isn't all bad, and it certainly makes for an interesting character, but it does come with the territory of becoming so emotionally unavailable and blinded to real-world problems. Those were just some of Iron Man's lesser-known weaknesses. What's the worst thing you think Tony Stark has ever done? Let us know in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe to CBR for more MCU videos like this one. Thanks for watching.